In this video, I'm going to do some architectural photography, and I'll show you how I process one of those images in Photoshop. Well, good morning. I am in downtown Stamford, Connecticut on a quiet, very cold Sunday morning, and I came down to do some architectural photography. Stamford's not a huge town, but it does have some interesting buildings, so I did some scouting around, and I'm going to take some shots. My first subject is this building in front of me, which has a very interesting curved facade. And I think I can get some shots that really highlight the curvature of this building. Well, the forecast was for partly cloudy, and so I was hoping I would get some nice white puffy clouds streaking across the sky, but unfortunately it's just a very flat sky and there's just no detail at all. So probably not going to get those kind of shots, but I really just focus on the architecture then and see if I can find some other interesting buildings down here. So, pretty cool building in back of me. It has this interesting kind of geometric structure you can see in front. So I'm getting this shot where I'm looking up through this structure and getting the relatively modern steel gray building behind it. Again, the sky's not great, but the building itself is pretty cool. Wandered around a bit. I got one more shot, but unfortunately I had to head home due to an emergency situation, which I was able to deal with. Stick around though. I'm going to show you how I process one of these images in Photoshop. Okay, so here we are on my computer in Photoshop, and this is the image that I'll be working with, and I want to show you how I'll turn this image into this image. I've already done some work in Lightroom. I usually start in Lightroom. I brought up some of the shadows, pulled down some of the highlights, converted to black and white. This was a color image, although it wasn't terribly colorful, but I didn't do too much, and it's a fairly flat image. In addition, I've already made really just 3 selections. I selected the sky, which is pretty straightforward, and then the 2 different parts of the building. To do that, I use the polygonal lasso tool. These are really just straight lines. Even the curvature at the top of the building, if you zoom way in, you see they're really just a series of straight lines. And so I was able to use that polygonal lasso tool, which is really good for selecting objects with straight lines, and made those selections. And so what I want to, and for much of the processing, I'll largely be using curves adjustment layers and a gradient tool. Let me start with the sky. And so I can go up to load selection. I've already selected it and saved it as sky. Hit OK. And so you could see the selection there. For the sky, I really want to darken it. I think with a darker sky, and I can brighten up parts of the building, it will really make the building pop more. And so to darken the sky, instead of using a curves adjustment layer, I'm actually going to use an exposure adjustment layer. So I went up to adjustments and selected that, and I could just pull down the exposure for the selected area of the sky. I don't want to go all the way to black. It just seems kind of fake to me. I want to have some tonality there, but on the darker side, and you can kind of play with it, and it's obviously personal preference, but for me, something like that works pretty well. Next thing I want to do is select part of the building. So I go to load selection. I called it actually left tower, was this skinny tower on the left. Hit OK. You can see that selection. What I want to do here is really highlight the curvature of this building. And so what I can do is first choose a curves adjustment layer. I'm going to pull up, and that's going to brighten the entire selection. Then I want to reselect. I can go to select, reselect, choose the gradient tool. I want to choose the reflected gradient tool. My foreground color is white. So if I pull out from the center towards the outside of the selection, you'll see in the middle the what I did, the increasing the brightness comes through. Now this can be kind of tricky. I want that brightness area to kind of go straight up this part of the building that I'm comfortable with, maybe something like that. And so you can see here's the before, here's the after. I can accentuate that even more by darkening the outsides of this selection. So I can go, I already selected the area, go to my adjustment panel and choose a curves adjustment layer, this time pulling down, and that's darkening the whole selection, but I want that middle to be bright. And so I can reselect, go to the gradient tool. This time I want the foreground color to be black, and I can pull from from the middle to the outside, and you get now that middle becomes bright again, which is showing the underlying layer. And so again, here's the before I did anything. Here's with the first adjustment and the second adjustment. And so I'm going to deselect it by hitting Command D. You really get that sense of curvature. And honestly, I'll do the same thing with the large part of the building, the big curved facade. So I'll go to load selection. I called it right curve facade. Hit OK. You see that selection. And I'll do the same thing. I'm going to go to a curves adjustment layer. I'm going to pull up. That will brighten the entire selection. I can reselect. Go to my gradient tool. I want the foreground color at first to be white, and pull from the middle towards the outside. And you can see here's the before, here's the after. It's brightening up that middle piece. And again, you can play with it. But like last time, I want to darken the outside to accentuate the curvature even more. So it's already selected. I can go back to my curves adjustment layer, pull down. That darkens the entire selection. I can reselect. Got my gradient tool selected. I'm going to make the foreground color black. And once again, pull from the middle to the outside. And you get a sense. This is not perfect. I'd probably play with it a bit more. I can deselect. Now, it was a very boring morning, and so the sky was really flat. So we can add some interest, maybe pretend there's some streaking clouds there, which if there were streaking clouds, I would just do a long exposure. But what I can do is I can select all of the layers. So I'm hitting the top one, press Shift, hit the bottom one to select all of them. On a Mac, if you hit Shift Command Option E, so Shift Command, I'm just doing it right now, Option E, it will take all of those layers, put them on a new layer above. And the other ones are still there, obviously. Now I can do something to the sky, and it'll be a pretty easy thing to do. So I go back to my selections. I'm going to load selection, make it sky. So I want to create a new layer, and you can see the icons down below. One of them is create a new layer. So it's a blank layer, and this time I want to add some clouds, and so I'm going to render and go down to clouds, and that's going to make the whole sky look, filled with fake clouds. Let's put a mask on there, and what I want to do is just have clouds in just part of the sky. And so I'm going to choose my brush. I want black to erase some of this. I'm going to make a bigger brush by hitting the right bracket key. And I'm just going to get rid of most of those clouds, except for maybe just a little bit where I can add a nice streak to it. And so, that'll do pretty well. Then it's pretty simple. Then I'm selecting the actual layer itself where the clouds are. I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, and Motion Blur. And you can change the angle of it here, but you can see it causes a nice blur. I'm going to hit OK. And I can accentuate that even more by doing it again. In fact, I could go down to motion blur, but right up here in the top of filter, you see it again. It will duplicate what you just did. That will make it even blurrier. Let's do it again. And you can see it gets even blurrier. Now, it looks a little bit fake. I want to maybe tone that down a bit. I'll bring the opacity down just a little bit. And so you get this kind of cool streaking clouds. I would probably play with this if I wanted to spend more time on it. I guess the last thing we could do, if we wanted to put a curves adjustment layer on everything, just to increase the contrast. So I'll put a curves adjustment layer, pull down on the left side to bring down the darker pixels, pull up on the right side to brighten up some of the highlights, and you get this pretty cool effect. Listen, if you like this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you want to see future videos, just stay tuned, and you can give me a thumbs up. That would be helpful as well. And until next time.